park bench in Haarlem, Netherlands 1943, a teenage girl with braided pigtails approaches a woman sitting alone. She looks about 12 years old, innocent, harmless. She asks, "What's your name?" The woman tells her. The girl pulls out a pistol, looks her in the eyes, and shoots her dead. Then she gets on her bicycle and rides away. Her name is Freddie Overs. She's 16 years old. And the woman she just killed was a Dutch collaborator who had a list of every Jew in the region, names and addresses she was about to hand to the Nazis. That list would have meant death for hundreds of innocent people. Freddie had just saved them all. By the end of the war, she and her sister would assassinate dozens of Nazis and collaborators. The exact number, no one knows. When asked, Freddie always gave the same answer. One should not ask a soldier any of that. Girls who learn to kill in an underground potato shed. Girls who refused to murder children, even the children of their enemies. Girls who remained human while fighting monsters. Freddie Oversteegen was born in 1925 in the village of Schoten, just outside Haarlem. Her childhood was anything but normal. Her family lived on a houseboat. Her father never made much money. Her mother, Trianch, was a communist who believed that when you see injustice, you don't look away, you act. When Freddie was young, her parents divorced. Her father sang a French farewell song from the bow of the ship as they left. She rarely saw him after that. Trianch moved the two girls into a tiny apartment in Haarlem. They slept on mattresses stuffed with straw. They had almost nothing, but their mothers still made room for others. Jewish refugees fleeing Germany, political fugitives running from the Nazis, strangers who needed a place to hide. Freddie and Truus grew up sharing their beds with people whose names they sometimes didn't even know. They made dolls for children suffering in the Spanish Civil War. They learned early that some things matter more than comfort. Their mother taught them one lesson. If you have to help somebody, you have to make sacrifices for yourself. It was a lesson they would never forget. May 10, 1940. Nazi Germany invaded the Netherlands. The Dutch army held out for 5 days, then surrendered. Freddie remembered what it felt like. "I remember how people were taken from their homes. The Germans were banging on doors with the butts of their rifles that made so much noise you'd hear it in the entire neighborhood. And they would always yell. It was very frightening. But the Oversteegen family didn't hide. They fought back. At night, they'd sneak through the streets with paste and paper, covering German propaganda posters with their own messages. The Netherlands must be free, and don't go to Germany. For every Dutch man working in Germany, a German soldier goes to the front. Then they'd race away on their bicycles, hearts pounding, knowing that if they were caught, they'd be shot. But they were never caught. Two young girls on bicycles who would suspect them. Their activities didn't go unnoticed. In 1941, a man named Frans van der Wil came to their door. He was the commander of the Haarlem Council of Resistance, part of the underground network fighting the Nazi occupation. He'd heard about the Oversteegen family, the mother who hid refugees, the daughters who distributed illegal pamphlets. He wanted to recruit them. He asked Trianch, "Can your daughters join the resistance?" Freddie was 14, Truus was 16. Their mother said yes. The girls said yes. But van der Wil wasn't convinced yet. He needed to know if they could be trusted, if they would break under pressure. So, he tested them. A few days later, he returned to their apartment, this time dressed as a Gestapo officer. He burst through the door, waving a gun, screaming in German, demanding to know where a Jewish man was hiding. Freddie and Truus didn't break. They didn't give up a single name. Instead, they fought back, kicking and hitting the man they thought was a Nazi, refusing to betray anyone, even if it meant their own deaths. Van der Wil stopped the act and revealed who he really was. They had passed the test. Now he told them what joining the resistance would actually mean. "You'll learn to sabotage bridges and railway lines." He paused, "and you'll learn to shoot Nazis." Truus looked at her little sister. Freddie grinned and said, "Well, that's something I've never done before." Their mother gave them one piece of advice before they left. Always stay human. The Oversteegen sisters were taken to an underground potato shed. There, in the darkness beneath the earth, they learned to fire a weapon. They learned how to aim, how to stay calm, how to kill. Their first mission wasn't assassinat ion, it was arson. Nazi warehouses needed to burn, but they were guarded by SS soldiers. The plan was simple. Freddie and Truus would approach the guards, talk to them, flirt with them, distract them with smiles and laughter while the rest of the resistance slipped in from behind and set the fires. It worked perfectly. The warehouses burned. The guards never suspected the two teenage girls who had been chatting with them moments before. Van der Wil saw what they were capable of. These girls could go places men couldn't. They could get close to targets no one else could reach. Their youth and innocence were weapons more powerful than any gun. It was time for them to learn what that really meant. Freddie's first victim wasn't a German soldier. It was a Dutch woman. The resistance had received intelligence about a collaborator, a Dutch citizen working with the Nazis. This woman had compiled a list of names, addresses, every Jew in the region. She was planning to hand it to the Germans. That list was a death sentence for hundreds of people, men, women, children, entire families who would be rounded up, deported, murdered. The resistance gave Freddie the assignment. She rode her bicycle to a public park where the woman would be. She found her target sitting on a bench. Freddie approached, casual, innocent, just a girl with braided hair. She asked, "What's your name?" The woman told her. Freddie confirmed she had the right target. She pulled out her pistol, looked the woman in the eyes, and shot her. The woman fell. Freddie got on her bicycle and rode away. Freddie and Truus developed their own techniques. Sometimes they worked alone, some at times together. Their methods evolved as they learned what worked. The forest. They would go to bars and taverns where German officers gathered. One sister would walk in alone, strike up a conversation with an officer, laugh at his jokes, touch his arm, lean in close. The officer always said yes. They'd walk into the forest together, deeper and deeper, away from the roads, away from witnesses, and there, hidden among the trees, the other sister would be waiting. One bullet to the head, the officer would fall. They'd leave his body in a hole that had already been dug and walk away on the bicycle. The bicycle, other times, speed was the weapon. Truus would pedal the bicycle while Freddie sat on the back, pistol ready. They'd identify their target walking down the street, ride past him, and Freddie would fire. Then they'd keep riding, just two girls on a bicycle. Nothing unusual. We always went by bike, never walked. That was too dangerous, Truus explained later. I always made sure the coast was clear. That worked very well. Sometimes they'd follow a target home, learn his address, his routine. Then they'd knock on his door. When he opened it, he'd see a young girl, innocent, harmless. By the time he realized the danger, it was too late. In 1943, a third member joined their cell. Her name was Janet Johanna Hanny Schaft. Everyone called her Hanny. She was different from the Oversteegen sisters. Hanny came from a middle-class family. Her father was a teacher. She was studying law at the University of Amsterdam, planning to become a human rights lawyer. But when the Nazis demanded that all students sign a loyalty pledge to Germany, Hanny refused. She was expelled. She didn't go home. She joined the resistance. Hanny had distinctive features that made her stand out. Bright red hair, green eyes, pale skin, the kind of face people remembered. It would eventually get her killed. But first, she would become one of the most feared resistance fighters in the Netherlands. Van der Waal tested her the same way he'd tested the Oversteegen sisters. He gave her a gun and sent her to assassinate a Nazi officer. She approached the target, raised the weapon. Her hands were shaking. She pulled the trigger. Click. The gun was empty. It had been a test. The Nazi officer revealed himself as Van der Waal. She had passed. Now she joined Freddie and Truus. The three young women formed a lethal unit. Hanny was the intellectual, the planner, the one who thought through every detail. Truus was the leader, decisive, fearless, the one who made the hard calls. Freddie was the scout, who mapped everything out in advance and knew every escape route. Together, they were unstoppable. They weren't just saboteurs or messengers. They were assassins. Freddie Oversteegen, her sister Truus, and their friend Hanny Schaft became some of the most effective and feared members of the Dutch resistance. But their story is not just about killing. It's a story about moral courage, about drawing lines in the sand, and about the terrible cost of fighting evil. These women did more than just pull triggers. They were masters of covert operations. They blew up railway lines, disrupting the horrific deportation trains that were sending thousands of Jews to concentration camps. They became smugglers of the most precious cargo, children. They would sneak Jewish children out of the country, sometimes walking them across treacherous borders in the dead of night, their small hands held tight. They stole identity papers from German officials and became expert forgers, creating new lives on paper for refugees desperate to disappear. They were also intelligence gatherers, risking everything to track German troop movements and feed that vital information to the Allied forces. And yes, they eliminated German soldiers, high-ranking Nazi officers, and, most importantly, Dutch collaborators. These collaborators were often the most insidious threats to their own countrymen and women who had turned traitor. They betrayed their Jewish neighbors for money or a sliver of power, working hand-in-glove with the Gestapo. As the war dragged on, Freddie and Truus found themselves hunting these traitors more and more. Truus later explained their grim duty with a chilling clarity. She saw these collaborators as cancerous tumors on the body of society. You had to cut them out like a surgeon, she said. There was no justice system left. You couldn't arrest them, you couldn't put them on trial. For the resistance, there was simply no other solution. One day, a directive came down from the high command of the resistance. The target was a man named Arthur Seyss-Inquart, the Reichskommissar of the Netherlands. one of the most powerful Nazis in the country, but the mission wasn't to kill him. It was to kidnap his children. The plan was to use them as bargaining chips, to force Seyss to release captured resistance fighters. And if he refused, the order was clear: kill the children. For Freddy, Truus, and Hanny, this was a moment of truth. They had taken many lives. They knew they would have to take more. But this was different. They unanimously refused the mission. Freddy's words captured their reasoning perfectly. "We are not Hitlerites. Resistance fighters don't murder children." It was a profound declaration. They had a line, a moral boundary they would not cross, no matter the strategic advantage. This was the razor's edge between fighting for freedom and becoming the very monster you were trying to destroy. Truus Overstegen was cycling through the streets one afternoon when she witnessed an act of such casual brutality it would be seared into her memory forever. A Dutch SS soldier, a man who had forsaken his own people to join the Nazis, was in the middle of a street altercation. He had torn an infant from its family. The father and the baby's sister were there, screaming in a storm of panic and grief. Then, the unthinkable happened. The soldier held the baby aloft and smashed its head against a brick wall. The child died instantly. Time seemed to stop for Truus. She got off her bicycle, pulled out her pistol, and shot the soldier dead, right there in the street, in broad daylight. This wasn't a planned mission. No orders had been given. It was a raw, visceral reaction to an unforgivable act. "That wasn't an assignment," she later said, "but I don't regret it. Some things don't need orders." It was justice, delivered in a heartbeat. By 1944, Hanny Shaft had become a legend and a prime target. Her fiery red hair was a beacon that had been spotted at too many assassinations and acts of sabotage. Witnesses described the girl with the red hair, and the name became infamous. The Nazis were desperate to catch her, issuing bulletins across the country demanding her capture. Hanny knew she was a marked woman. She dyed her hair black, started wearing glasses, and did everything she could to alter her appearance, but she refused to stop fighting. In June of 1944, Hanny and another resistance fighter, Jan Boonkamp, were given the task of eliminating a notorious Dutch collaborator named Willem Raggett. They tracked him down and ambushed him. Boonkamp fired, hitting his target, but Raggett didn't go down immediately. In the ensuing chaos, Raggett, or perhaps another officer, managed to shoot back, hitting Boonkamp in the stomach. Hanny managed to escape the scene, but Jan was captured. Mortally wounded, he was taken to a hospital where the Nazis began their interrogation. Despite the agony, he refused to talk. So, the Nazis resorted to deception. A German officer posed as a friendly resistance member, whispering to the dying Jan that he was there to help. Delirious from pain, blood loss, and medication, Jan believed the lie. In his final moments, he gave up Hanny's address. He died shortly after his tragic betrayal. The Gestapo acted immediately. They raided Hanny's parents' home. They weren't there to find Hanny, but to use her family as bait. Her mother and father were arrested and sent to a concentration camp. The message was clear: surrender, or your parents will suffer. Devastated, Hanny was forced into hiding. She could no longer be an active fighter. If she were captured now, it wouldn't just be her own life on the line. Everyone she had ever known, every contact she had, would be in mortal danger. For months she was a ghost, living in the shadows, her war seemingly over, but she couldn't stay hidden forever. March 21st, 1945. The war was almost over. Allied forces were advancing across Europe, and liberation for the Netherlands was just weeks away. That day, Hanny was cycling through the city of Haarlem. In her bag, she carried copies of an illegal communist newspaper and a pistol. It was a routine she'd done countless times before, but this time her luck ran out. She was stopped at a Nazi checkpoint. The soldiers searched her bag. They found everything. She was arrested on the spot and taken to a prison in Amsterdam for weeks. They interrogated her, tortured her, and held her in solitary confinement. They sensed they had captured someone important, a significant figure in the resistance, but they needed her to confirm it. They needed a confession. Then, one day, they noticed something small, something easily missed. Her hair was dyed black, but her roots were growing, and those roots were bright red. They had finally found her. They had found the girl with the red hair. Faced with this discovery, Hanny admitted to her role in the resistance. She confessed to the assassinations she had carried out. She told them what she had done, but she never gave up a single name. Not one member of her resistance cell. April 17, 1945. This was just 18 days before the Netherlands would be liberated. The war was effectively over. Everyone knew it. There was even an agreement between the occupying Nazi forces and the Dutch resistance to stop all executions. But Wilhelm Lages, the high-ranking Nazi officer in charge of Hanny's case, ignored it. He was obsessed. He wanted Hanny Shaft dead. Two Dutch collaborators, traitors to their own country, were assigned as her executioners. Their names were Martin Kuiper and Andries Peters. They drove Hanny out to the sand dunes of Overveen, the same dunes where hundreds of resistance fighters had already been killed and buried in unmarked graves. Kuiper raised his pistol and fired, but the shot only grazed Hanny's head. It wounded her, but it didn't kill her. In a moment of incredible defiance, she looked at her executioner and said, "I shoot better than you." Enraged, Peters raised his submachine gun and fired a burst. Hanny Schaaf died there in the dunes. She was 24 years old. They buried her in a shallow grave, so shallow that her brilliant red hair was still visible above the sand. Just 18 days later, on May 5, 1945, the Netherlands was liberated. After the war, an effort began to find and identify the resistance members buried in the Overveen dunes. They found 422 bodies, 400. She was given a state funeral, and Queen Wilhelmina herself called her the symbol of the resistance. But what about Freddie and Truus, the two teenage sisters who had fought alongside her, who had risked everything? They received nothing. For decades, the Dutch government simply ignored them. During the Cold War, anyone with communist ties was viewed with suspicion, sidelined, and forgotten. The sisters who had put their lives on the line to save their country were now treated like enemies of the state. Truus, the older sister, coped by pouring her experiences into art. She became a sculptor, creating powerful memorials to the resistance. She wrote a memoir and spoke publicly about what they had done, ensuring their story wouldn't be completely erased. Freddie chose a different path. She tried to leave the war behind. "I coped by getting married and having babies," she later said. She married a man named Jan Dekker, had 3 children, and tried her best to build a normal, quiet life. But the past never truly let her go. She suffered from severe insomnia and was haunted by nightmares that would strike without warning. Every year on May 4th, Remembrance Day in the Netherlands, she would wake up filled with a sense of dread. When people would ask her how many people she had killed during the war, she always gave the same firm answer: "One should not ask a soldier any of that." She never revealed the number. Neither did Truus. Some burdens you just have to carry alone. For almost 70 years, Freddie and Truus waited for recognition that never seemed to come. Finally, in 2014, the Dutch Prime Minister, Mark Rutte, invited them to a special ceremony. He awarded them the Mobilization War Cross, a military honor for their service during World War II. Freddie was 89 years old. Truus was 91. Freddie's son later said it was the happiest day of his mother's life. After 69 long years, someone from their government finally said, "Thank you." After that, streets in Harlem were named after them. Their story was told in new books and documentaries, but for most of their lives, they had lived in silence, unrecognized and unharmed. Two teenage girls who had taken on the Nazi war machine, forgotten by the very country they had helped save. Truus Overstegen passed away on June 18, 2016. She was 92. Freddie Overstegen died on September 5, 2018, just one day before her 93rd birthday. Throughout her life, Freddie made regular visits to Hanny Schaaf's grave. She always left red roses for the friend who didn't make it to the end. When asked what advice she had for future generations, Truus once said, "When you have to make a decision, it must be the right one, and you must always remain human." Those were almost the exact words their mother had spoken to them on the day they joined the resistance. Always stay human. And they did. Freddie and Truus killed people. They shot men in dark forests and on quiet street corners. They watched the life drain from their enemies' eyes. But they remained human. They cried after every single kill. They famously refused an order to kidnap the children of a high-ranking Nazi official. They carried the heavy weight of their actions for the rest of their lives. The Nazis, on the other hand, killed millions systematically, industrially, and without a shred of remorse. In doing so, they lost their humanity entirely. And that is the fundamental difference. Think about it. During World War II, an estimated 90% of the Dutch population just tried to live their lives as normally as possible under Nazi occupation. About 5% actively collaborated with the enemy, and the remaining 5% joined the resistance. Of that small fraction, only a handful were women who took up arms, and even fewer killed with their own hands. Freddie Overstegen was one of them, a 14-year-old girl with braided pigtails who carried a pistol hidden in her bicycle basket. This wasn't a hero from a movie. There was no dramatic music, no slow-motion action shots, no clean Hollywood ending. There was just a teenage girl who decided that some things are worth fighting for, some things are worth killing for, and some things are worth dying for. Together, the three of them, Freddie, Truus, and Hanny, are believed to have killed dozens of Nazis and Dutch collaborators. Some estimates push that number to over 100. Freddie lived to be 92 years old. She never told a soul how many Nazis she killed, and she never ever apologized for it. Thank you so much for watching. If you found this story as powerful as I did, please consider liking this video and subscribing for more stories of incredible people from history. See you next time.